Mark said you guys can't wait until I check out before you beat up on the Buckeyes. Sorry, Mark.
My bad. It's
especially the last few years. It's a Clemson tradition. It's just there's a rivalry there. It's just you can't really deny it. There's some, or if you don't want to call it a rivalry, it's definitely there's definitely some mutual animosity.
There's mutual fan hate between the two programs for sure. We both love to go at each other, and for me, it runs super deep. Right, I had people growing up that were Ohio State fans,
that's right,
and I absolutely hated it, and they always came at me with the trash talk and all that. So it runs deep for me personally, and then they're just a really fun fan base to rile up. As I'm sure they feel the same way about us, right? Like when Clemson and Ohio State go at it, man, the fans are just
it's
a
really interesting dynamic. I don't think there's another two programs that aren't really, because historically they don't really have that much history, but they've played 5 games total over the entire span of college football history, but all 5 games had a lot at stake. And just a lot of stuff happened. A lot of controversy, injuries, officiating, and and all of that. So their coach Woody Hayes got fired. I didn't even mention that.
Oh yeah, that infamous.
The infamous Gator Bowl. Yeah, so it's a really cool. I think it's really cool. And it's kind of a. And from a Clemson fan perspective, it's cool because it's like, hey, you've made it. You're on the radar of a historical program like Ohio State,
right?
Just
and the thing is, we haven't had
been so good over the last decade. So
it's not like a rivalry in a sense where we play every year, but every time we play, it is a significant game. There's big implications on the line when we play Ohio State. And I think that plays into a lot of the fan emotions going into it too, right? Because we never play each other when it's not like this huge, drawn up game, media spectacle, college football playoffs, Gator Bowl, big type games, right? So that's that kind of plays into it as well. And their fans, no offense, Mark, but they do seem to cry about the refs quite often. Not you.
Hey, listen, you're not going to see me disagreeing. I ain't disagreeing. But hey, we can only talk trash so much. They got us in the last. They got us in the last meeting. Got us pretty good in the last meeting. So until we get back, we gotta. Hey, they've got the bragging rights right now. But
absolutely.
Hopefully this season.
It was funny. Last weekend watching Clemson softball and Ohio State softball. Were you watching the game and all those reviews back to back?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, here we go. Ohio State crying about the refs again. They want to challenge every time. It was so funny. That was a thought in my head. I was like, man, I should check Jordan right now.
That's great.
But it was hilarious.
The parallels.
Yep. But Clemson softball getting it done, man. They are getting it done. We got some players on that team. The offense is insane, dude. I don't know, they can just they're fun to watch because they put up so many runs. So it's pretty crazy. Mark gets back in, says 4 postseason meetings in 8 seasons, 3 playoffs plus an Orange Bowl. That's huge. Yeah, like I said, games always have high implications, and I think that feeds into kind of the fans going at each other.
And even even when you go back to the Gator Bowl of the '78, that ended up being Woody Hayes' last game coached, and it was Danny Ford's first. So just a kind of a really and obviously Danny Ford went on to do great things, won a national championship at Clemson. So it was kind of a diverging point for both programs. Ohio State didn't fall off the map when Hayes retired or was fired, but it was a shift for both programs as far as they were moving into a new era. So just every single game has just had massive stakes, whether it was you realized it or not. And then so it's just a really interesting dynamic between the two schools. Just a lot of history. I always say they share a lot of history for two schools that don't share much history.
I know it's crazy. It's crazy that that it's kind of set up like that, or that it's played out like that so many times. We talk about the big games that have happened. It's insane. He said OSU fans hate to lose. They think it should never happen.
When you won as much as Ohio State,
I don't blame them. I can relate. Clemson fans are, kind of like that now. We get a 10-3 season. We're like, hold up, what is 10-3? Yeah. What? No, right? We've talked ad nauseum on this show about that. Rightfully so. We have the roster that we should expect to win as well.
Right.
So
and Ohio State fans have a lot of reason to gripe with some of the stuff that happens with their program too. I mean, they
absolutely
they won at a high level, but they just it's been a minute since they won a championship. Relatively, I mean, 2014 is still relatively recent, but. Just they've had some really great teams and haven't been able to get it done, and you're just like, well, if you're a fan and the kind of caliber of player that Ohio State recruits and the coaching staff and all the resources they have, it's like, eventually you got to get it done, especially. And so I think some of the criticism towards Ryan Day is a little too much, like
it gets a little out of hand, like people calling for his job and stuff like that. Now that may be like a loud, like super minority of the fan base, right? And I'm sure it is. But like stuff like that's crazy. Like John gets in and says Ryan Day has lost 2 Big Ten games his entire career, but because they're both Michigan, Buckeyes actually calling for his job. See, that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Like, pump the brakes, people. Like, I know, and I get it. Look no further than me and you on this show talking about how much the South Carolina loss bugged us this season, right? Yeah. As much like that bothered us, right?
One of the worst Clemson losses I've just from the just based on season expectation and all that. That South Carolina loss is one of the worst I've been alive to see as a fan.
Right.
Just brutal. It's gotten up there with 2013 Florida State. Well, actually 2013 and 2014 Florida State were brutal.
Right.
07 Boston College. Obviously the 15 championship loss against Alabama. But it wasn't a bad loss, but it was just like you were right there and you weren't. And just some really poor special teams play and allowing O.J. Howard to run free in the secondary cost you that game where you felt like you were the better team. Just I've been allowed to see some really great Clemson wins and some embarrassing losses.
Absolutely.
That South Carolina loss this year was up there.
It was a tough one. So we say all that to say this: we get it, Ohio State fans. Yeah. Like, I understand how losses like losing to Michigan 2 years in a row. Because if we lose next year to South Carolina, boy, let me tell you, you better tune into the Voice of College Football Clemson channel because we're gonna be on here talking. Okay, but with that said, calling for Dabo Swinney's job would be ridiculous. Just like calling for Ryan Day's job right now is ridiculous, right? Right. So I get it, but that's our job as fans, isn't it? To get super emotional and make irrational comments after losses.
And I understand. Now, if Ryan Day goes on this really long, this long losing streak against Ohio State or something like that, okay, I could see some because at Ohio State the expectation is to beat Michigan. That is part of the job requirement is beating Michigan. Especially beating them more often than you don't. And so now if this becomes a trend and Ryan Day is consistently losing to Michigan, then okay, we can start having those conversations. But he's lost 2 in a row, but he also destroyed them the first time he played them. So the pendulum can swing back the other way. You never know. But just. If it becomes a trend, then we can kind of Buckeye fans can have a conversation because
it will. Don't worry.
Beating Michigan is a job requirement.
Don't worry. No coach is ever going to get comfortable losing at Ohio State. Promise you. Yeah. Okay, they're one of their programs. They're not going to get comfortable, and if they do, they'll be in an unemployment line pretty soon. Mark says the '78 Gator Bowl was one of the first games he ever watched. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I did not watch that game. Well,
I was
not live.
I was 2 decades too late for me.
I did not watch it. I was still not here yet, I guess. John says that's immense pressure for anyone to take. It is. But it's also why they're so well compensated. And, when you take a job like that, you know what you're signing up for. LBC gets in, says USC fans thanks Clemson for getting Earl Bruce hired at Ohio State.
That's a good point.
Yeah.